If communication principles help you build and understand what your project is, good and proper planning principles will help you ensure that you can actually build that project. So let's look at some basic planning principles that you can use to make sure you start off with a good plan. Remember, it does not matter what type of process model you are using. All of them have planning as part of it. So first, understand the scope of your project. This lets you know what your end goal is going to be. It also gives you an idea of how big the project is. Bigger projects require more planning, testing, etc. Simply because there are more unknowns. I've worked on projects that are used by one person, projects that had over 50,000 registered users, and others that could potentially reach even millions of viewers. At each level, there's a massive increase in their complexity. The next is to involve stakeholders as part of the plan. Let them help identify the priorities of features, potential deadlines, and even constraints of the project. You may need to negotiate some here as things change so that you can be realistic. However, a good stakeholder will have a good feel for what the final project needs to be and how effective it is. You notice that in working with some of these comments, there were terms and comments that you heard in communication. Because the odds of you being the stakeholder are very slim, your communication needs to be effective even during planning. Next is to recognize that planning is iterative. Things are likely to change and need to be updated as you work through a project. We especially see this through things like the iterative or the evolutionary process models. With agile development, the change and constant planning is expected. So be ready to make changes to your plan. Next is estimate based upon what you know. At some point, you're going to have to estimate effort, duration, and cost. And these can only be estimated based upon what you know. These values are going to change based upon updates to the plan. But the more you know, the better and more accurate your estimate can be. The duration and the amount of work required are going to be the hardest things to estimate, especially as a new software engineer. It's helpful to look to more seasoned engineers to help you better estimate. But regardless, you will always want to assume it's going to take a little longer than you plan. You might ask, why should I assume it's going to take longer? Well, one of the things you need to consider is our next principle, which is considering risk. You see, there will always be issues when you're developing a project. You can't get away from it. So, can you build contingencies into your plan? Now, you cannot plan for everything, but you can plan for realistic issues. And this could be anything from losing time because of a severe weather instance. It could be because someone has moved on from the organization. It could just be that sometimes people go on vacation and you can't get feedback as quickly as you want to from the end user. To add to that, though, you need to plan realistically. Know what needs to be done. The next principle that you want to add to is to be realistic. Know what needs to be done. You don't need to design the Taj Mahal if what you really need is a single-story house. So build based upon realistic expectations. The next principle is to learn to adjust the granularity. What's granularity? Well, high granularity has lots of details. Low granularity only has the basic ideas and concepts. You want to start small with a low granularity and build up higher and higher as you get closer to working on it. The parts that you're working on now or are about to work on should have the highest amount of granularity. This is especially important if you're developing using agile methods or the evolutionary process models. The next principle is, how are you going to define quality? You see, quality is a relative term. How will you ensure you are working towards the right definition? Well, simply define it. Now remember, you should always be working towards developing high quality software. So look back at that definition and let's help you define what that's going to look like. Next is, how will you accommodate change? Because change is inevitable. You need to define a process on how your stakeholders can request change. And this is especially important for agile project management, which wants to work on accepting change. It's one of their 12 principles. The next and final principle is to track your plan frequently and adjust it as needed. When are you going to adjust it? Well, if you ever start to see you falling behind, or if you see a problem that starts to arise that's going to cause an issue, adjust the plan so that you can fix those issues and get back on track.